housing one, that was a one-time event.
That was working with Region 12. We put in $2,500 per house, and we are wrapping up. Oh, no, we are completed with that. We haven't completed that. So
We
there is
have-
not any plans at this point.
We've not had any requests. Region 12 sometimes will encourage us to look at this. We've not had that recently that I can recall. And I think they work on the basis of demand from people who talk to them about things. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do this, and you can do this later if you decide to do it. You just have to make an amendment in your budget later on, because we don't know for sure what we would need right now.
Is this the place where, say, that marketing money they presented about earlier tonight might go, Laura?
Probably going to a CADC request, wouldn't it?
It could.
Yeah. That would go in the CAC.
Okay.
Although typically, we have not put that, we
Carroll
put,
Area
what,
Development,
22,000 on a hotel motel?
I'm sorry, say that.
22,000 goes to the chamber at a hotel motel?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, you guys.
And that's not here, of
Right.
course, that's not CADC, that's chamber.
That's chamber. Yeah, we can decide, or you guys can decide if it would go, if you're asking in this section of housing, that would be general fund money, or if there is a different funding source, then it would just go into a different fund. Hotel motel, then we would create a line item for there.
Thank you.
Next one is planning and zoning. That's, Greg, do you know anything about that? It's just a
It's,
catch-all fund?
If the permit fees or the application fees go in here, and then if we've got expenses, maps, stuff like that, not a major area of activity.
Central Business District, Randy, you can address that?
Sure, I can. These are expenses in connection with the downtown streetscape or maintenance of the downtown area. The largest being electric service, that's to the street lights. So all of the streetscape streetlights are metered, and we pay electrical costs. And we currently have about 310 city-owned streetlights down in town. And the projection through the end of the streetscape projects is about 500 total streetlights.
Each one of those is individually metered?
No, each section is metered. We've got about
Okay.
3 or 4 meters installed right now.
They're in those panels that stand up, right?
Yes, they are.
Gotcha.
Okay, the next section would be, there's nothing there, that's communication utility. That's not been active for years. Then we get to the area that we, legislative. Laura, you want to go through those? You've worked with those?
Yep, this area under J is what we call the general government budget. Legislative is where we pay city council as well as our expenses for planning and goal setting. No changes are being proposed to the pay. Next one is for the executive, that's the mayor's pay. No proposal to change that amount either. Next is the financial administration. This is basically our office staff down in City Hall. The only I would say the major change that we have is under the capital area, $25,000 for equipment replacement. Next fiscal year, it's been about 5 years since our server's been replaced, and that's kind of about the life cycle of servers. I can't believe I'm doing this again. It feels like I just did it last year. So we'll be looking at replacing our server downstairs, which is basically the hub of our financial software.
You're not changing the computer software, just the server.
Just the server. Yeah, that's usually a 2-day project, and usually the first day is a long day. Last time, I think we worked till 10 o'clock that night, and then came back the next day to finish up.
Okay.
So, not as big as probably some companies, but big enough for us. Next is elections. We do have, and a city election, or I should say, city election either for city offices or any special type of election, if council so desires to have a special election, costs somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000. So there's funds allocated for 16 to have up to 2 elections and 1 for next year. In 16, actually, we haven't been billed for yet. We still need to pay for the city elections we had last November. So that's 1 election. Then there's an allocation to do another election in both 16 and or 17. Legal services, this is our attorney fees, Dave Bruner retainer, as well as other legal advice he provides to us, as well as when we contact our labor attorney and Alderson Committee for just miscellaneous general matters, if it's not specifically related to like a debt issuance or something, we would put in this category. The next page, 75, City Hall General Building, the 16,000, refresh my memory what that was for.
Was that the air conditioner?
Yes, the air conditioner at the historical building. We did the heater a year or two ago, and it's time to look at the air conditioner. Page 76 is our, the tort liability, the worker comp, the property insurance, and the liability insurance is in this line item for the expense. I usually roughly build in about a 5% increase, not knowing exactly what our rates are going to be, because that information we usually don't get until June. And the miscellaneous general fund, nothing out of the ordinary in here.
Section K is mostly things that are relative to moving monies around. We can certainly go through them if you would desire, if you have any questions about what they are. Our farmland rent comes from a small piece of property that we have down at the wastewater facility. That's the only piece that we have that we lease anymore. 30-some acres, Randy?
Yes, I believe so.
And we have a lease agreement. I can't remember how much it is. It's somewhat in line with what the lease arrangements are around the area. Interest on deposits, if you want to explain a little bit about how that works, Laura.
Our money is what we call in a pooled cash system. We don't have separate checking accounts for each of the individual funds, but all the money is, we have one main checking account and then a bunch of savings accounts and CDs, and then all the money that, interest that is earned on the money in the bank gets allocated to each of the funds monthly based upon an average balance of the fund that month. And in the general fund, this is my best guess of where I think what we're going to get for that, for this year and next year.
Don't want to rush through this. If you have concerns or questions, when you see transfers, those are basically things that Randy and Laura will work with, the streets and financial. And transfers doesn't mean that you're manipulating, it means that you're moving things around. They don't increase your revenue and they don't increase your expense in real dollars, but they may in the budgeting process.
For instance, on page 79, when he's talking about transfers, I'll give you an example here. There's a line item called transfers from employee benefits special revenue fund. Going back to the earlier discussion where I mentioned we have special revenue that we get, state code is written such that the special revenue is required to be deposited into its own special fund all by itself. And then from there, you disperse the funds to what you can use it for. So in the case of employee benefits, the tax money that we collect through our monthly allocation from the county, it is identified, this is the amount that you are collecting for your special revenue employee benefits, as well as I also get a line item that says this is the amount that you get for your tort liability, and this is the amount that you get for the 810. Well, with the employee benefits, that money comes to us, it has to be put into a special revenue fund itself. Then from there, I can transfer out of there once I have eligible expenses, or to prove up that I do have eligible expenses in the general fund and or the road use tax fund. And so at the end of the year is when we typically have all of our all of our expenses identified, and we know how much we spent for everything for those particular items. And then we do a transfer that says these are the amount of expenses and this is what we want to use that money for.
What's the CP vet and then their
Which one?
transfer from CP dash VET?
That was a few years ago. We had a capital projects fund set up for Veterans
Oh,
Vets
that's
Memorial.
okay, well,
And that was to close out the fund.
Fine, so that's done, okay.
Yeah.
This ends all of the general fund, right? This is the end of the general fund.
Yeah, this is the end of the,
So the balance of what's left is hotel, motel, local option sales tax, water, wastewater, stormwater, and road use tax. Okay? Laura can talk about the hotel, motel. That's revenue and expenses.
on page 86, What we do with the hotel motel, first off, is we try to identify the revenue and expenses that relates to the theater at the rec center, because we believe that all has to do with cultural activity in the community. So that's what this first page does, is the revenue there is for the theater, and then expenses. We allocate 5% of one of the employees' expenses just for kind of the admin, maintenance, the rental, and the collecting the fees for that, and then any other expenses that we have. I don't, no, we don't have a big ticket item in here.
No.
Electrical's like 8% of the electrical bill at the rec. That's the 5,800.
You've got a
8%
capital
of
there
that.
for, one item of $5,000, curtains. Is that right, Jack?
No,
No,
the curtains were actually at 16,000.
16,000, that's in, yeah.
Oh,
The 5,000, I don't remember. how
Miscellaneous
many-
theater
Just
improvements.
improvements we need to do.
Is that where the screen had out, coming out of the general fund?
Yep,
And not out of this?
right.
Okay.
Is that was more for, was it exercise type programs, Jack?
The 32,000? No, that's more for the theater. Again, that's that screen that we have to put up, and then a projector. It's time to replace the projector that's used there. Were two of the big expenses we're looking at with there.
Thank
Right
you.
now in our budget, we do have money for curtains. Find out that we probably don't have enough money put in, so, but we'll figure out how to get it done.
yeah, this allocation is for part of the operating costs.
Most of
The
yeah.
amount that he's talking about, any improvements, unless specifically tagged to hotel motel, will come out of the general fund. And we've done them out of hotel motel.
So that's why you're doing the projector screen out of the general.
Yeah.
We're not tagging the hotel motel with that one.
Is there, have they looked at doing any of the sound, like, improvements to the sound system, speakers, that sort of thing?
We've done that.
That's been done,
That's been
okay.
done. I know that some of the organizations are going to bring in additional speakers, because we provide, a nice sound, but they want different sounds.
More,
and
okay.
Variety, be able to raise and lower, and ours can't do things like that.
Continue, Mark.
The other major thing that comes out of hotel motel is the $22,000 that's allocated to the chamber for community promotion ideas, or community promotion things. You also do have in the cover of your book, on the inside cover, there is that
Sheets that look like this.
running spreadsheet that shows, we're roughly estimating 220,000 of hotel motel tax collections coming in each year, and then identify the different expenditures that are reflected in these pages. So if you look at your running total, at the end of 17, we're roughly anticipating 174,000, but that also includes there that and we're not showing in that balance there, is $40,000 set aside as a reserve, that in case for some reason the hotel motel tax collections aren't as strong in a particular year, that we don't in essence over budget ourselves.
Yeah, well, do you know, like with Manning coming online with motel, will that, how that'll affect any of that here?
I don't know.
So,
I guess their market would be different than ours, but there could be some pull. Initially, when we set this up, we based it upon 65% occupancy. You weren't here, right? Or you were here?
I was, and then.
We took
from-
all the rooms, gave them a price, marked them up against, I thought it was like 65% occupancy, which we don't know. Hotels aren't really going to tell you what their occupancy rates are. And that was pretty close.
And
We
then
estimated a little less than 200,000.
Right, I originally, I think I started out either like at 190 or 200,000, and
Yep.
then as past history has shown, we've been consistently more like 220, and so I felt, yeah, maybe we better take a look at that as a more realistic number.
Since I don't utilize the motels in town, I can tell you that any place I stay out of town, it's higher than it has been in the past. So I'm going to assume that they're also raising the rates here, which helps us somewhat. But if you lose occupancy, then you don't have as many owners.
anybody have any questions about the hotel motel? Some of the money is being transferred out of this to fund capital projects into one of those CP fund projects that we have later in the budget.
Randy, are you ready?
Yes, tab M, road use tax. Page 92 indicates the revenue projection. Actually, the road use tax, of course, is that money received from the state based on gasoline tax receipts or gasoline sales. Right now, for the current fiscal year, the state is projecting per capita distribution, that's the way that tax is distributed to cities, at $120.50 per person. And next year going up to $121. So that'll generate for us, out of the total revenue, I guess it's right here, road use tax from state, $1,222,000. And the balance of the revenue is from the Employee Special Revenue Fund. Actually, we use that levy to pay those employee-related expenses for the personnel that are paid from the road use tax. Moving on through the budget itself, the expenditure portion of the budget is pretty straightforward. The capital items that are included in here are purchase or replacement of a truck, medium-duty truck, snowplow sander at $150,000. The replacement of a sandblaster at $6,000, and a skid loader sweeper at $5,000. Those would be in tab C under capital, but they're also in this expenditure portion of the budget. We will be transferring, or we're proposing to transfer $45,000 from the road use tax fund to the capital project street fund to pay a portion of the High Ridge Road improvements next summer. Unless you have any questions, I don't have anything else on the road use tax.
The next tab, N, is for the Employee Benefit Special Revenue Fund. We talked just a little bit about that, where the requirement to receive the tax collections into this fund, and then they are transferred out to the general fund and the road use tax fund. So that's all this fund does. After that is the Emergency Special Revenue Fund. I left that in there since there's a little bit of history here, and two, to realize that levy is eligible to be utilized if necessary, but it's not currently proposed to be utilized in fiscal 17. Under tab P, we've got the local option sales tax. You also have a sheet that has a projection, a 5-year projection out on the local option sales tax, as well as a 2-year history on what we anticipate for collections from the local option sales tax, showing that we have our tax relief going towards the debt service, and then some of the projects that are being proposed as use of these funds. So once again, this is a special revenue fund that requires the receipts to be deposited into it, and then the monies can be transferred from there, and that's what we're doing. Any questions on the local option sales tax? The next tab Q is our urban renewal special revenue funds. Out of these, we have 4 urban renewal areas that are still having collections, at least in this current fiscal year. Next year, it'll be down to 2. Two areas will have completed their obligations, and we will not collect in them. Our most active one is our downtown urban renewal area, as we continue to do improvements in the downtown area, in that urban renewal area. We're going to continue to ask for TIF collections. Once again, special revenue into its own special fund, and then if you'll recall, we have an internal loan with the water department. So we have payment schedules set up. Once the money's collected in here, then we repay the water fund for those loans. And this is related to streetscape projects that we're doing, as well as Grant Road and Highway 30 intersection improvements.
And a project that you're in design now on adjacent to Highway 71 North.
That's part of
Yeah, that's
streetscape.
part of it.
Yeah,
Which one?
a streetscape.
It was a streetscape.
But
Yeah, was that like
But
9 or 10
if-
or something?
since we tend to think of streetscape as being in the downtown area, this is actually an extension of it. So that is in the planning stage.
Yeah, out by A&W, that frontage right there.
And you might want to note that the urban renewal area generates, what is that figure, Laura? 864,000?
Around
Yeah.
900 this year, but then next year, this is our best guess because it's based upon what the levy is. And of course, we don't know what the levy's going to be for next year until everybody sets their levies. And so we have roughly anticipated close to 770,000 in that area. But if the levy is a little bit higher than that, then that amount could go up or down for the opposite way with the levy. Tab R is our trust funds for, we have two of them that we call the Rec Center Trust and the Library Trust. This is where if the Rec Center or the library receives donations from patrons that they specifically want something done in those locations, we'll put it into this fund, so then, and then the expenditure will be made out of that fund. And also in the Rec Center Trust Fund, we use this fund for our soccer concessions, since we run those concessions in the spring or the fall or both.
Rainbow, yeah.
Spring and fall soccer concessions, the revenue comes in here and the expenditures are paid out. And then if there's a fund balance, sometimes Jack will use this to purchase additional exercise equipment for some type of an improvement at the rec center. The library trust fund, most of that activity or the revenue comes from the state. Brandy, you can probably speak to what that specifically is for.
Yeah, the state gives us reimbursements for interlibrary loan, and they also give us what they call Enrich Iowa funds, and Enrich Iowa is, it's money from the legislature to go to libraries for, it could be for facilities, material, technology, any one of those things, and so that those funds do go into the trust fund.
Any questions on those? Tab S is some more special revenue funds, and these specifically relate to the police department. The forfeiture fund, which doesn't look like we have any activity plan necessarily for next year, Brad.
No extra bicycles?
Got plenty.
And then the crime prevention special project, this has a little bit more activity. This is where the police department does their vehicle, the
Inspection?
salvage
Salvage
vehicle
vehicle inspection.
inspections. The revenue comes in here, we charge $30 and then we pay the state $10 for inspection. So we keep 20 of it, and then they'll use it to enhance the police operations. T is the debt service fund. This is the listing of all the principal and interest payments. We already looked at that summary back in tab D, so I will not go through this unless somebody's got a specific question. This is just the place where we put it in our software, so we can track it. And as well as where we have our transfers in and our property. Do anybody have any questions about the debt service fund? Tab U is the capital projects fund. Equipment purchases, we do not have any major big ticket item equipment purchases in here that we would be utilizing either multiple funding sources or some other source besides general fund or something like that. So there's nothing planned in there for this next year. The airport, they are trying to get another FAA grant to, I don't know if it's rehab, replace exactly, but to do some work on their entrance. And the FAA grant is usually 90% grant, 10% local match, and so that's how it's reflected in here. And these are probably rough cost estimates at this point. I don't believe they've been officially approved for that grant at this point, but if they do get approved, I'm sure they're gonna wanna move on it to get the project going. So we've got some funds allocated. The funding source, the 10% is being proposed as a general fund expenditure, or general fund transfer into here. And on page 154 starts what we call our capital project streets fund. And I will let Randy talk about that fund.
Okay, yeah, in the capital projects, the projects that we're proposing for next year include the street maintenance building, to begin that design work. The corridor entry features that was discussed during the capital improvement plan or program discussion. Of course, the High Ridge Road project that we're currently in design, going to letting March 15th. And this Third Street project, which is really the design work that will follow for construction the following year after the storm sewer project is completed. So those are basically the 4 projects included in this capital projects plan.
That amount for the Third Street resurface, is that for the design work or is that for the resurfacing?
That's the design work.
That's the, okay.
On page 156, I'll just add to this really quickly. This is our transfers in. These are different items that are funding all those projects that Randy talked about. Any questions on that fund? And the next fund is our capital projects corridor of commerce. And Randy?
Okay, in the Quarter of Commerce portion of the budget, we anticipate continue to move forward on the US 30 and Grant Road intersection. That project is kind of stalled out prior to right-of-way acquisition. Right now, it's in the hands of the DOT, which it has been for a few months, and we're not getting a response on it. The next step would be then right-of-way acquisition and then moving into the construction. And the construction plans are about 60% complete right now. So it's moving, but it's moving very slowly.
Randy, does the DOT, do they take care of the right-of-way acquisition as far as getting it forward, but we fund it, correct?
No, that was discussed. And the DOT has done kind of an about-face on it.
Okay.
They want us to do all of the minor right-of-way acquisition, and they want to take direct control of the major acquisitions. So it's kind of split between the two entities.
So then when you're talking to us about the right-of-way acquisition that's stalling this, is it from the city's perspective or is it from the DOT now?
Oh, the stall is actually right now DOT review of the plans, of the preliminary plans. The DOT has structured schedules for submittals working up to a letting date. And we met the structured schedule for submittal of the preliminary plans, and we haven't gotten a response on it.
Okay.
So that's kind of adding to the time delay on it.
Okay.
So how is minor and major acquisitions defined?
Well, I would suppose it's project by project. In our case, we have several properties where there's just a sliver of land needed. Because we're widening the road, we move over 10 feet, 12 feet, 11 feet, whatever it is. And there are a few of those properties. There also are properties that when you take 11 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet, it may impact the use of the property. And if that's the case, then a decision is made whether to take the entire property or not. And that decision will be made by the DOT. So that kind of becomes a major acquisition, you know, to buy a property and possibly a business. And the revenue we're expecting, we certainly have been approved or granted a traffic safety improvement program grant from the DOT for this project in the amount of $500,000. That is placed in the budget, actually will receive the grant as we go into construction. And it's actually given to us incrementally. So we'll have a pay estimate to a contractor, we'll turn around and submit that to the DOT for reimbursement. So it'll come gradually, but we have reflected that within this budget, the total amount.
So that could probably flow through into the next budget beyond here.
It could, you know, the reason I suggested it in this budget, you know, if things go right, we'll be in construction, so we'll be expending the money for construction in this budget, so we put the revenue in. If we get pushed back a fiscal year in construction, then the revenue will be pushed back fiscal year. And then we've got Streetscape 8, that's also under design, anticipated for construction this coming summer. And the Court Street project was actually, well, we'd done, it was Streetscape 7, and that was completed. And we customarily don't put street resurfacing in the Streetscape project. They're really two different types of work. So in a few cases, we followed the completion of the streetscape with a street resurfacing. Makes the whole area look nuts. We had designed the Court Street project from 4th to 7th in the current 2015 resurfacing project. But when we got to a firm cost on that project, it exceeded the amount of money we had. So we pulled Court Street out of it. Now we're proposing to put it back in for next fiscal year and bid it as an overlay project. So that's, estimated cost is up to $150,000 on that one. And it's actually that, as it turns out, that overlay or that resurfacing type work within the TIF area is an eligible expenditure. So that's why it's here instead of in the capital project streets fund. Unless there are any questions, that's pretty much the CP corridor fund.
Page 162, what is that?
This is the capital project Parks and Recreation. This is where
162?
we- On 162, yep. This is where we account for a lot of the capital project items in the Park and Rec area. So currently, we do have on page 162 is revenue side, on 163 is the expenditure side. We've got the cemetery maintenance building in there, a portion of the Merchants Park improvement, which a bulk of that construction will probably occur in fiscal 16, maybe a little bit in 17. Right now, we do currently still have in here the rec center locker rooms project, along with the funding as the debt service or the debt issuance, as well as some monies for trails.
It's probably important to remember that budgets give you authority to spend money. They don't necessarily tell you to spend money. So if you authorize an amount larger than what you want, other than really not wanting it, you still have the right to say it will not be expended because it will be under a contract in some form at the amounts we're talking about here. So it won't be automatically spent if you approve
Now, the maintenance building here says 486,000, wasn't it 475?
What's included in that number, Jerry, is the issuance costs, a portion of the amount that we pay
Okay.
for PFM and our bonding attorney. Yes, the original estimate was 475 for construction.
What's the next area, Laura?
Well, the last project I'll touch on is the capital project for the outdoor aquatic center. We had still been receiving some funds for donations in that project, or for that project, and that's why this is still being shown as an active fund, but it may be done soon.
Which one was that, what page?
166?
Yeah.
69, excuse me.
Well, it starts on 166.
On the aquatic
It's
center.
$10,000. Actually ends up being a little less because it was put good.
Right. Any questions on the capital project? A lot of these projects probably are very familiar in that we've discussed them when we talked to council about the CIP years ago. And so we took the CIP document and then incorporated it into our budget form, our software. The next tab B is for our permanent trust funds. As we talked about with permanent trust funds, the principal amount stays intact. The first one, fund, the perpetual care. When we sell internal rights for $500 a space, half of the proceeds go into this fund, the other half go into the general fund for our daily maintenance operations. So the half that goes into here, we do not touch. They go in here. We're building that pot of money up so that in someday, long after I'm gone, and when the cemetery is full, you have a pot of money there that's generating some interest and some money to maintain the care of it.
And to tie this together from that balance sheet, I'm looking back here.
Is there a state requirement as to how
Yes.
much?
Yes,
Yes,
well,
it's a minimum of,
25%?
I think maybe 25% or $50. We have chosen, and it's just been set up for as long as I've been here, to be 50%.
As we raised the price, it was more money. And the fund, where is it?
Towards the bottom.
Perpetual care fund is anticipated to be $448,782, which at the current interest rates that you receive would get you maybe one more.
I want to say last time we did a count, we were about 60% of the cemetery where their plots are being used or sold. When you look at the map, you look at it, you think, really, there's still 40% there? Still quite a bit. So, you don't want to look at going that south end anytime soon. You know, if those, what's that? With the best views.
What's the other one in that area?
The rec center, that's if somebody happens to give the rec center a donation and they do not tag it to a specific project or specific purchase of some sort, we put it in that fund.
And that
It has very little activity in that fund,
and that fund balance is projected to be
like 35,000.
$32,196. We're down to the biggies right now.
All right.
Okay.
Wanna keep going?
Keep going?
Well, there's 3 tabs left, just go.
Let's do it.
Okay. Water utility fund. Of course, this is where the operation of the water department is funded. The treatment plant, the high service pump, the distribution system, our counts and collections, well operations, all funded from this area of the budget. The revenue primarily is from metered water sales, and actually about $1,350,000 of the total revenue from metered water. And then we have other major receipts are about $865,000 from TIF in repayment of the loans that are currently in effect. And then the tower lease. We lease space on the top of the water tower to 2 different cell companies. And the total revenue from those is just under $40,000 per year. So we have pretty good contracts. But getting into the expenditures, of course, each section is detailed in your expenditure. In the administration, contains that portion of the salaries for those of us in City Hall, the three of us, and then some other needs. It has like all of the medical insurance for the entire department and that type of thing. But to highlight the other expenditures within the funds, we have in capital items, which would also be in tab C, distribution, fire hydrant and piping at $16,000. That's just kind of an annual need for material purchase. We do have the meter replacement funding for this fiscal year in at $250,000. That was also in the capital improvement program. And as you recall, we're anticipating about a 4 or 5 year, 5 year, I guess, meter change out program that's about $250,000 a year. And that is underway. We actually spent about $210,000 last year, and that we're currently well on track to consume the funding that's available for this year and get meters changed out.
Have you been doing residential yet?
We have been doing some, yes.
Okay.
We really concentrated first on the commercial.
Right.
For a couple of reasons. One, they're the more difficult ones to do, and we wanted to take some time and get them done. And then the larger commercial are the larger revenue generators. And if we have accurate meters in there, we have accurate billings. So they were kind of the more important ones. But we are beginning now on the residentials. We also have funded from the water fund a GIS, Geographic Information System position, and associated costs. We have not got that position filled at this time, but it is one of our efforts for this and the next fiscal year. We are proposing to connect our facilities, our water tower and high service pump and wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant with fiber optic cable. We have now radio connection among those, and we've had recurring problems with our radio communications. And we've done everything that has been recommended, and we still have communication failures by radio. So we're proposing to connect the main locations by fiber optic and get a reliable connection among them. Because everything now is run by a SCADA system. It's a supervisory data acquisition and control system, so that, like, for example, the water tower. The information on water tower levels is transmitted to the water treatment plant, and those water tower levels, under that system, it's supervisory. So at the water plant, they can change the level of water in the water tower. And that's just one example. All of our lift stations, all of our wells, all well controls are transmitted to the water treatment plant. And so communication is critical in those areas. And with problems we've been having, it appears that fiber optic may be the answer to it. So that's a proposal. It's at $5,000 to get it up and running, but then there's a monthly fee for it, I think of about $120.
The cable's already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually the cable, it's owned by Western Iowa Network. It's their fiber optic. But then we would be leasing it after the initial installation. So that's contained in this budget proposal. Also, there is almost $55,000 in this proposal for fire hydrant painting. You'll recall, we got into a fire hydrant painting project a few years ago. We've utilized volunteers extensively in that, and we have sanded down and repainted all of the hydrants that we can that do not have lead paint on them. Lead paint on high fire hydrants is a little different issue. And what we have proposed, we have 471 hydrants in place, and we've completely repainted 256. So the remaining 195 are the lead-containing hydrants. And our proposal is to contract for the lead paint removal and capture, and then painting of those 195 hydrants. And there, the total cost for lead removal and containment and testing and painting is about almost $300 a hydrant. So it gets a little spendy, but that's.
Well, don't they have to cover those when they're spraying that lead paint off so it doesn't get in the air?
They have to not only cover them, they have to test the air around it. So it's costly.
It's extensive.
But you take the lead paint off once, you're done with it.
Done with it.
You know, next time you paint them, you don't have to do it. So that's it's $54,600 proposal. And then, of course, we have the current contract meter reading, which is one of our best deals in the city at $23,000. But with the change out in meters, we'll eventually work out of that contract. Any questions on that water utility portion of the budget?
That's not your capital portion.
No. Actually, the next section is on page 184, and that's the depreciation fund. That fund was set up following the construction of the water treatment plant, we transferred $50,000 a year from the water utility revenues to the depreciation fund. And that was kind of an arbitrary number at the time, but it's built up a little bit of money. And we have not used it in the past. We are proposing to use some of that funding this year to pay a portion of that filter rehab project that's underway. That project came in well over what we'd anticipated it would, and in order to get the project moving, we proposed to utilize the depreciation fund, which in all actuality, that's the reason the depreciation fund was set up, to fund, or pre-fund, of course, the replacement of items associated with the water, and particularly the water treatment plant. And so it fits well. It's only a portion of the funding, the rest is from the general water revenue. So,
And Randy, that fund would be pegged to have an ending balance of $716,000.
yes, yep. That's following the expenditure of, the proposed expenditure is $300,515. It has, over the years, has become reasonably healthy. Not enough to replace everything in the plant, but reasonably. Page 187, Water Utility Capital Improvement Fund. The only expenditure that we propose for this fiscal year is to begin the design work on our water main replacement project. Several years ago, we had a series of water main replacement projects that were directed primarily to improve pressures around town. And we did the most critical of those, and there are a few, actually there's about 3 smaller projects left to be done. And so now we're trying to work those in, one to be designed next year, construction the following year, and try to get 3 of those worked in back to back in future years. And they're also in the capital, reflected in the capital improvement program. So they'll primarily be kind of miscellaneous little projects around town, totaling about $500,000 per each year. And then the last, page 190, water meter deposit fund, that's where we account for the money that's we receive from water meter deposits and distribute when people move out or receive a refund from their deposit. Well, unless there are any questions on the water utility, we can move right into the sewer utility. We'll be doing on tab X. Okay, this, of course, the sewer utility is similar to water. It's a utility fund. The revenue is primarily rates, structure, and then it funds the operation of the wastewater treatment plant and the collection system. As far as revenues are concerned, and I did forget to mention in the water revenues, I'll step back just a second, our last water rate increase was in 2007, July 1st of 2007. And our water utility fund will fund all of our capital, projected capital projects. You know, the well and transmission main, our filter rehab project, the meter replacement project, and the 3 water main replacement projects without another rate increase, or there's no rate increase projected in the near future for that. Good news. Bad news, the wastewater system has had, I think, 4 consecutive increases of about 6.5. There's one left in July of 16, and it's already approved by ordinance. And then following those rate increases were really to position you to be able to absorb a debt load for those future projected capital improvements, or they're on the horizon and they're probably certain, but we don't know when. One's disinfection, and then the other would be related to nitrogen and phosphorus, nutrient removal. So they'll be coming, we just don't know when. And once a permit is reissued, then there'll be a schedule for compliance, and we'll know. But in the meantime, we've raised the rates incrementally and generated some cash, and we'll continue to do that. It appears that for long-term projections, after July 1st of 16, there wouldn't need to be another rate increase, a lot depending on the final costs of these improvements. But if they follow the costs that are in the capital improvement program, there wouldn't be a need for another rate increase for several years. The fund is in pretty good shape. And then that depends on how you structure your financing, your debt repayment, how you want to structure that, and how much cash you use up front to lower the debt borrowed. So there's a lot of unanswered questions until the cost of these improvements are firm. Then those decisions can start to be made. But for the near term, the 5-year term, it's probably in pretty good shape. But anyway, our sewer rental, of course, we have a 6.5% rate increase due on July 1st of 16. That generates about $1.9 million of the total revenue, which is practically all of it. Decent fund balance projected at over $2.3 million in that fund. Expenditures, capital expenditures in the fund include lagoon cleaning at $75,000, which is really pretty much an annual expenditure. And of course, we have recommended that solids handling be reviewed in our next capital review to possibly be changed. This is the second best deal in the city, where we spend $75,000 a year to get rid of our sludge. It's just, can't get any cheaper than that. But it's not without its faults. We almost didn't get it out this year. And if we don't get it out, it goes all over the plant. So it has to be taken out twice a year. And this fall was too wet to land apply sludge. So they waited until winter and actually put it on frozen ground to get it applied, to get us through till spring. So it's not a real reliable, it's really weather dependent. And it's worthwhile looking at the alternatives to this type of sludge handling, which we would recommend be done in any plant expansion review.
You just put that on farm ground?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Do you alter it so it doesn't go in the same
Same
farm ground all the time, or?
Yeah, yeah. There are requirements through the EPA and DNR for load that can be placed on farm properties. So many pounds per year it can be put on, and that is monitored. That's all reported and then submitted to the DNR. So yeah, we comply with all their land application regulations.
And you mentioned a new alternative is what?
Yeah, there's several different alternatives for sludge handling. One is drying the sludge. See, what we do, and the reason we do it twice a year, we built the sludge storage lagoon years and years ago. And at that time, the plant was a trickling filter plant, which is just a process, and it's a biological process. But the sludge that was created from that trickling filter plant was about 6% solids. So it was still pretty fluid. But we could hold an entire year's worth of 6% solids in the sludge storage lagoon that we built. And that was done on purpose. Because we thought, well, you know, the only time you can apply on farmland in this country is after the crops come out in the fall. It worked good for years and years. Well, then we built the activated sludge plant, which is a different biological process. It's an aerobic process. And what happens in aerobic processes is the solids attract or air, because air is added. Well, when the solids attract air, they don't settle out of the water. So our sludge going into the lagoon now is 3%. It's twice as thin, half as thick as it was before. So now we have to empty the lagoon twice a year. So one of the alternatives is drying the sludge, drying it down to a cake, a 16% solids cake. Well, that takes chemical and it takes power to do. So any process other than what we're using is probably going to be more expensive, but they become more reliable. You can store a cake until you can get rid of it in a couple of different ways. You can land apply it, which we do now. It's just land applied like cattle manure is applied as opposed to hog manure, which we do now. And the other alternative is you can landfill it if you need to, or it can be used as a soil augmentation at a landfill. So it becomes a little easier to get rid of, and it's easier to store. So that's something to look into. Maybe it would be way too costly. You know, many plants use it, but they just pay the price.
That won't be part of what the DNR is looking at us for the
No.
disinfection stuff.
No, there's
That
no
would-
requirement for sludge well, there are requirements for sludge handling, but we're doing one of them that's fully
So
acceptable.
it's acceptable.
But
for now.
maybe it's not as reliable as it should be. But I would suggest, and it's recommended, that whenever we review and do our studies for nutrients and disinfections, that we include sludge handling so that a decision can be made. We quantify what is needed for facilities and costs, and then make a decision on whether a change should be made at that time. And of course, it would make sense to do any construction at the same time nutrient construction or disinfection construction. So that's a little longer term issue. The other capital item that we have in here is the jetback truck. And of course, it's in the current fiscal year budgeted. We just re-estimated zero for this year and put it in next year, so no additional funding. But out of practicality, you know, even if we ordered it today, it wouldn't be here until probably November of next year. The out time on them is that far, so,
So this would be for a new truck?
yes, yeah.
You get trade in on the old one, or you're
Yes.
gonna keep?
Well,
You just still have just one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, we traded in the old one, and the net is still in the 400,000 range.
Oh,
They're a little spendy, you know, but the one we have is 20 years old. You know, we've gotten a lot of good use out of it. And it's still running. They're still using it. But it's been a good truck. We've done some major repair lately on it. You know, it's one of those things, you push it 20 years, the most expensive thing on the truck is the pump. And you don't want the pump to go out. Well, we put a new pump on it this summer. So here we have a new pump on an old truck. But maybe we should have traded it 2 years ago, you know. And that's what you run into. It's just, you push things as far as you can, and sometimes most of the time we're fortunate, sometimes you get caught. And we got caught, so
okay.
hindsight's, you know, a little better. Let me see. On to page 196 is the sewer utility depreciation fund. And that we do contribute $35,000 a year to that fund from the sewer revenues. And it was established after the completion of the treatment plant upgrade in 2005. And its balance would be about $550,000 at the end of next year. In the capital improvement fund, on page 199, we really don't have any projects in the current budget. We've moved both those disinfection, sludge handling, and nutrient reduction back another year, as you saw in the capital improvement program. We'll do that until we get the permit reissued that has a schedule in it. And if you recall, the permit expired in 2010, has not been renewed yet for us, and we're not even in a priority watershed for renewal. So it could come anytime, or it could be a long time. And the longer it is, the more money we generally save, I think, you know, through the rate structure. So we're not calling them every day wanting a permit. We'll just let them send it to us. And they eventually will. That's just the way it is. And that's about it for the sewer utility funds. Unless there are any questions. The next tab, Y, is the stormwater utility fund. And that is funded, of course, primarily from the revenue of the stormwater fee that we have on our utility bill. Revenues from those fees are expected to total about $250,000 next year. We plan expenditure from that. Actually, it's from the capital improvement fund on page 206. To fund the majority of the Third Street Storm Sewer Project at $1.4 million. And then the design of the stream bed stabilization project. We do have a stream bed that we need to stabilize in Rolling Hills Park. And it's planned to be designed during the next fiscal year and then constructed the following year.
That's a 35,000 for the planning, right?
Yeah, for the planning, yes. And that's the majority of the expenditure in that fund. Well, unless there are any questions, that's the end of the utility payments.
The last little segment from Laura.
You want to wait till Monday to do that? or-
Tab Z is the medical insurance.
Funny guy.
Tab Z is the medical insurance internal service fund, which we've already talked about. It's kind of our review that we set up to buffer the health insurance possible increases and for the partial self-funding.
Now, this is the completion of the presentation. I'd like to have you go back to that page 1, which talks about those ending balances projected.
Starting over.
No, we're not.
Absorb 25% the first time you hear it.
Right now, I'd rather absorb 2%.
I sleep with it under my pillow, Jack. I got more than
Okay.
25%.
We're getting to the funny stage.
Yeah, time to get done.
As you go down, and I think, Laura, the hotel motel tax is actually a part of the general fund, am I correct?
Yes.
So the general fund balance would actually be 2 million, but we keep that separated. So you remember now that this is a modest decrease in the levy with a balance of 25% plus, or is it 25%, Laura?
25.7.
25.7%. That meets the first criteria, which is a balance being carried. Go to the road use tax fund, you still see a balance of 1.3 million there. That is tagged with some expenditures in the future. Then you go down to the other ones, the local option sales tax. You have your sheets that indicate that we have a balance there. And you go down further and you get to the corridor of commerce, capital projects. That's basically flow through money, am I right?
Yes.
And so that money, that 1.6 million, that's programmed in someplace. We just haven't spent it yet. I skipped over the smaller amounts. You go down to perpetual care, which we talked about, 448,000. It would be better if it had a 1 in front of it or a 2 in front of it, but it doesn't, so that's where we're at. That's what we will have to operate with when all of us are gone and our successors are trying to work their way through this. Rec Center, excuse me.
The reason why I brought that up is about that is the landfill has to keep a substantial more
Yeah, more
amount
than
than
that.
theirs.
But they have to
Ours is-
guarantee
Okay,
closure. They have what they call a closure fund.
right.
This is actually our closure fund, and this is the best we can do, except that state law, as far as I understand it, will absolutely demand that you care for that cemetery. Doesn't mean you have to do anything fancy, but you have to care for it. And I think the care, generally, Jackie, maybe you can help me, is mowing and making sure that the stones are kept upright.
Yep. Trimming around the stones, that's a lot of time, a lot of weed whipping around there.
So
Yeah,
those
tree
are,
removal, if you replace trees, if you take quite a few off, so.
so if we were to close, have no revenue, we would be obligated in perpetuity to care for the cemetery. In some cases, in rural areas, it means maybe mowing it once in a while, but I don't suspect that the people of Carroll, even 50 or 100 years from now, will accept that fact. So
48
hopefully this
years.
fund just keeps rolling. Then you will notice that in the water utility fund, there's an ending balance of $2.3 million. Am I right, Randy?
Yes.
And then you'll notice underneath that is a depreciation fund, so there's about $3 million available. We don't consider that to be an excess. We consider that to be, as Randy said, programming, no projections of increases in the foreseeable, but there will be some in the future, but not in the foreseeable.
Is the-
One time we talked about a second water tower, we've never talked about that again.
Okay. That's what I was gonna ask about the other water tower. But that would have to be in addition.
And that's probably in the $2 million range.
Yes, close to it, yes.
Then you go down to sewer utility, and you know that when Randy says there's no more increases in there, we're not going to cash flow the expenses at the wastewater. We're going to be able to make the principal and interest payments. If you look at your sheet, it shows 9 more years of 600, 700 some thousand per year payments.
Yes, in your debt schedule.
So that every year that goes by, cheer yourself on because you're getting closer to the end of a big one. And the next one might be, that was $11 million issued, started out at 4%? 3%?
3%,
3%. Now at 175?
yes.
So this is this is what we would call good circumstances for making the payments. And that's, I'm trying to tell you that Randy has this all planned out, so he can never leave. And then
So
you
does it
go,
end up being $10 or $12 million?
well, we don't know. We're anticipating 3 and 4 now. I
Right,
think, isn't it?
that's what we were
Something
thinking.
of that nature. And those are estimates, better than guesstimates. And then you see all of the depreciation funds and such that come. And the stormwater utility, we started the stormwater fund about 12 years ago, Randy?
Yeah, probably so.
And we started at 180-some thousand, now we're at 250, well, no, we started at a little over 200, as I recall. You take 10 years times 250 and you got $2.5 million. That makes a difference in all these street projects. This Third Street project is largely funded by that, but not totally. Just to give you an idea, I would like to tell you that this is pretty good news. You'll have to decide what the value of it is. I wouldn't ask you to make any more decisions tonight, but that's up to the mayor and you to decide where you want to go. We'll pick it up Monday night. And what you want to do, Laura, if we were to move to saying you're going to finalize your budget that you want to send to the public, if that's done on Monday night, then when could we possibly go to hearing? First meeting in March?
Ideally, yes.
Oh, we set 7th of March, didn't we?
We did, and that is a special council meeting if we wanted to do that, yes. Technically, you could go to March 15th, or excuse me, the
14th.
first regular meeting in March is March 14th. It needs to be filed by the 15th, but that's cutting it pretty close.
Miss it for snow and we've got a problem with that.
Yes. We didn't think it could snow as much as it did on Tuesday of this week, for a long time. So, I'm just trying to give you an idea. You're probably going to have either a special meeting or run the risk of being a little bit later, or have a special meeting earlier. We have a 7 and 14-day notice on that?
10 and 20.
10 and 20. So it has to be at least 10 days after the time that you pass a resolution to go to hearing, and then it can't be more than 20 days ahead.
And we've had those special meetings in the past that have taken 10 minutes.
Yes.
You know, if that.
Is there anything that you want us to do between now and Monday when we come back and look at this again? Any areas? We're making the assumption that at this point, you don't have any major concerns. You may have some concerns, but you don't have any major concerns. So we're going to make the assumption that this is pretty much what you want. You tell us if it's different than that on Monday night. We prefer that you tell us before that so we can do some prep work if you want to make some changes.
I guess I look at, I just look at the funding of the street maintenance facility. And like I said, we've been telling the public that we would have a public vote on that. I just want everybody to be aware that you go forward with that type of an idea, other projects will come up, and there's going to be that expectation that we won't have to vote on it. Other big projects that come up. The public there may be special interest groups that come along and say, we want to have our building funded that way. So just be prepared if that comes up. Okay?
And to reinforce a little bit, I asked Laura if she would check with PFM to see what it would cost if we did bond and have some vote to issue some debt. And I think has checked or will check on some things. And the conversations, people talking to me have continued. And there is some ill will because we shifted and did a 180 away from a citizen vote. And my concern is looking at the big picture and projects down the road. We want them all to succeed. And I don't think we want to taint the water. And I think being the age I am, people who are talking to me they are voters, they show up. We see the demographics of who showed up to vote, you know, in all the Lazy River, the recent election. And they're the ones that are talking to me because they follow things, they're educated on city issues, and I would hate to see us gain ill will by changing what we had planned to do and possibly jeopardize anything future. Maybe, you know, I don't know. It's going to take, you know, some thought. I'm just the messenger, but I've had several more discussions, and a woman talked to me lately, and I've never thought of it this way, and she said, I did not realize when I voted favorably for the local option sales tax a couple years ago, that was in 12, that it would be used to prevent me from voting on a project that was indicated by you, talking to me, that I would get to vote on. I never thought of it that way. So anyway, it's late, we've worked hard, and great budget, good tight budgets, and anyway, that I've continued to be contacted by people who run into me. I think we need to explore, you know, we have this parceled out plan, and I'd like to know more about what it actually would do to the levy if we ever would go back to what we originally said we were going to do in the 2 previous budget cycles. So anyway, just so you know what I've been hearing and what I've been hearing on the phone and in person. So, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, going through it, I think we've done overall, otherwise,
great
I think
budget.
it's a great budget. We're doing a very good service. Continue to do that for the citizens of Carroll. And I appreciate all the hard work that you guys have done, the staff has done, and thank you again. Any other comments? Seek a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Clay?
Yes.
Brandon?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Mike? Misty? Yes. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much for your time.